all profit is value extraction. And that means that all profit is theft from you.
Corporate America is on welfare, and we got to get them off welfare.
Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all.
Hi, welcome to Cars and Comrades, the podcast for leftist politics and car stuff. My name is Bryant. With me today is Zach.
Hello.
Brandon.
Hi.
And Connor.
Hi.
And today we're going to do, this might end up being a two-parter, but we're going to do an episode about nuclear-powered vehicles, mostly during the Cold War. So it's a little bit of a tenuous connection to leftist politics, but I think knowing the history of the Cold War, the weird projects that the U.S. and the USSR got up to as far as like military industrial complex type stuff, I think it's kind of interesting. And it does connect to cars a little bit, but mostly it's, military vehicles. But before we get into all of that, let's just talk about what we've been working on this week on our different cars. I guess since last time we talked, I have done almost nothing with my cars. I am getting ready to get my MR2 back on the road. So I took the battery out and put it on a charger. So that is all charged up and ready to go. Then I gotta, reinflate the tires, make sure there's no flat spots on them. I don't know, prime the engine, turn it over a couple times, get it started. Then I can put it in my driveway and tackle all the electrical problems that it has. But I did accomplish something. I put hydraulic disc brakes on my mountain bike, which if you don't have hydraulic disc brakes on your mountain bike, I highly suggest. I almost flew from my handlebars with the stopping power. So, and they're pretty easy to modulate once you get the hang of it. But I don't think I'm going back to the mechanical brakes anytime soon. So that's about all I've done.
For bikes.
It's. I mean, my bike came set up for disc brakes. Like it has all the mounting locations for it. So it was pretty easy. I just bought a Chinese kit from Amazon for like $60. And then I had to get the actual rotors also. That was a separate thing. If you are looking at Chinese made kits, make sure that it has the left and the right and the front and the back the way that you want it, because I didn't know this, but like apparently in other countries, it's opposite of what American mountain bikes are set up as. So that's like most of them. You have to kind of look for the left for the front. That's the American way of doing things apparently. Or if you just want to learn to do it differently, just go with the non-American version. And I mean, it's pretty easy. It all just bolts on with some hex bolts and some what do you call it? Allen wrenches and whatnot.
Yeah.
I did. I read the reviews on Amazon, and one guy had the little plug where you fill the hydraulic fluid in there. It like the screw backed out on him, and like all the hydraulic fluid bled out, and he lost his brakes going downhill. So I put some JB weld over that screw. So hopefully it's not going to happen to me.
That seems more of a Loctite situation, bud.
I did. Well, I mean, it's a flush. It's screwed in flush. So I put a little bit of Loctite on it, the red stuff, and then dabbed some JB weld over it just as like a visual thing. Like if I see a little crack around that, I know that it's coming loose. But I think it should be fine. I guess I could have taken a center punch and punched it into the edge of the threads, but I don't know. If I have to maintain it later, I don't want to have to deal with that. But
fair enough.
Connor, I know you've been working on your what is it, 350 or 370Z? I forget which you have.
It's a 350. I'm, I'd love to have a 370 someday, but they're a little more expensive, a bit quicker, but I'm still at that 350Z levels. So yeah, actually, yesterday was was finally the big day where I brought it to the shop where it is having the engine taken out and rebuilt and everything else. So trans swap, all new internals, completely rebuilt heads, new cams, new radiator, all that shit. So gonna be without that car for a solid 2 months at least, which is which is a weird feeling, because like I just don't have a car at the moment, except for if at some point I am gonna bring my Camaro from my dad's house and bring it to my apartment, but it's snowy here, and so that's tough to do. So, and who knows if it'll start consistently when it's that cold. It's not going to be a super reliable daily, let's just say. So, functionally, I'm without my normal car, but it should come back pretty well built up and ready for the track, and I should be able to beat the shit out of it. So I'm excited, but I'm anxious. And on the bright side, though, the literal mountain of car parts that was in the living room is now at the shop. So.
Dude, when I finally got a workshop space, I gained 2 extra rooms in my house.
Yeah, it's it was stacking up, and you're just like, there's nowhere else for it to go. In the middle of the living room, that's where it is. So that's all gone. Yeah, I'm excited. It's gonna be a pretty cool build, I think. And yeah, so I should be able to have some fun with that. But yesterday was the big day, so now I'm going to be shifting to little, odds and ends on the Camaro when I have time.
Yeah, Brandon, I've got a mountain of Subaru parts in my crawl space right now, so I can identify. But
my
Connor,
basement and attic are still full of car and motorcycle parts, but also and I still have to get 6 vans out of the junkyard. That I have purchased, paid for, but haven't removed yet.
I bow to your superior car hoarding.
Dude, I have enough stuff to build a high performance, large displacement shovel head motor in my attic. I just don't do anything with it.
Yeah, and I've got enough parts to build a very low performance Vespa moped engine in my crawl space, but so Connor, what was what was your power goal with the rebuild, and tell me about the transmission swap that you're doing.
So the power goals are pretty modest. So I'm spending a whole lot of money, and I'm expecting to get probably over 300 wheel horsepower. Realistically, in the range of maybe 310 to 320. If I'm really super lucky, I might be in that 340 wheel horsepower range. But again, none of those numbers are particularly impressive, or especially given what all is getting done to this car. Honestly, the VQ35 was kind of just a really well-designed engine from the beginning, minus some a few shortcomings. But for power, NA. They were already pretty good from the factory. So there's only so much you can do. But the whole point being, I'm building it for being able to handle a lot of abuse. So decent power, and it should hopefully hold up pretty well. And then the trans swap is real simple. It's just switching to a CD009, which is what came in some of the rev up models of the 05 350Z. And they came in all of the 06s, and it was a better designed trans. It had better synchros in it, which is really what was having a problem on mine. It's been 2 or 3 years of it's tough to get into gear, and that obviously slows you down and makes me drive like shit. So it'll be nice to have something that's going to shift smoother, and also the CD009 is like notorious for handling 1,000 horsepower stock, and like people are scooping those up to put behind LS motors and crazy builds. So I scooped one up for myself. They're still priced pretty reasonably, and it's going into my car. So that should help some of the transmission inconveniences I had.
I don't really know like those transmissions at all. Is that like a 4-speed, 5-speed? Like, how's that set up?
So it is a 6-speed.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, fancy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the gearing could. Honestly, the gearing leaves a little bit to be desired. I will admit, like, honestly, I think the cars could be capable of a bit more if sixth gear was a little bit taller. It would probably be even a little bit better on gas, because like your top speed in the 350Z is limited by actual red line rather than like a speed governor. So like you're pretty much at red line when you're doing like 160 or so. So, I wish it was a little bit taller of a gear that could just like hold out a little bit longer and get.
How tall is that gear?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's which I might be getting it backwards too. Taller is where you have a greater range, right? Which would I think actually mean a smaller gear. I don't know. I'm probably mixing it up, but
taller.
I wish
it,
it, like yes, then that's then I wish it was taller.
Yeah.
Because like going like 70 and 80, you're cruising at like 3,000 RPM, which isn't terrible, but like my Camaro in sixth gear, you're going 70, you're at 2,000 RPM, and that's kind of an improvement in my mind anyway. So it's not super great gear ratios, but the trans itself is super fucking strong.
Yeah, I don't know why there's a lot of manufacturers put like really close ratio, low geared 6-speed transmissions, like especially in sports cars. Like I think the new ND Miata has a 6-speed manual, and only gear 6 is an overdrive. Like fifth gear is 1-to-1, which on like a normal transmission is usually third gear.
Yeah.
And they just have it geared way, way low. And like then like on my MR2, if I'm driving that at let's say 70 miles an hour in fifth gear, I'm at like 4,000 something RPM. It's it doesn't really make sense to have it geared that low for top gear, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, to me, that's like you should be able to cruise very comfortably at high speed. That's what that gear should be, and they've made it like they've just shifted it down. And I guess like oh well, you'll keep a better power band when you're at a road course, and you're like, I'm usually not at a road course. Like, and plus, road courses have nice long straightaways. It would be really cool if I could hit like 180 instead of 160. But I don't know. I'm sure the engineers know something that I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there was some focus group where someone was like, I don't have power to pass on the highway in fifth gear or sixth gear or whatever. It's like, well, fucking downshift, dumbass.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. Like,
well, Zach, what have you been working on? I know that you finally got your bolt for your Audi engine. And did you get it all put together?
Oh, did you turn your Audi into an innie?
I did. I took the bolt that was Audi and I put it innie, and I got it all together. Got it running. It was running really smoothly. Couple weird electrical things, just a couple lights on the dash, but I wasn't too concerned. And the plan was always to take it to a shop and just have them take care of the clutch bleeding, just because I had tried that on that car before, and I was having a really weird issue where I just couldn't figure out, I didn't know if there was some special bleed technique or machine that needed to be on the car, because it's an Audi and everything for those cars is special and unique. So I took it to a shop and had them take a look at it, and they told me that it was not just the clutch slave cylinder that needed to be, I broke a clutch slave cylinder. So I was going to have them replace that and then bleed the clutch system. And then they informed me that there's about $4,500 worth of work needed due to other issues that the car has.
Oh.
Yeah.
I hate hearing that.
Oh, jeez.
What the
yeah,
fuck
so
is
that was a
the
bummer.
car to the tune of $4,500?
They're saying new clutch, new flywheel, a bunch of weird specific parts that they have to get direct from Germany, and then labor, and then obviously the clutch, slave cylinder, and the bleed. And labor for Audi specific shops. If you've ever owned a German car and taken it to a shop, you know that their labor does not come cheap. So that's the bulk of the price. My estimates for the price of all the parts that they mentioned to me is just under $1,500. But then labor on top of that is what is really the big chunk of change there. So
yeah, do that.
If they're
yourself,
nice,
man.
if they're nice, they'll give me a list.
Are you on it? So are you already on like Audi forums or something? Because like, yeah, I would. This is the time to do that by yourself because
Oh yeah,
clutches are they're you know, they can be difficult, and I'm sure with Audi they didn't make it easy, but I feel like that's something you could probably be capable of doing if you know like the random parts. That's crazy. $4,500 for a fucking clutch replacement is just outrageous. God.
yeah, it's absurd, and yeah, like I was saying, if they're real nice, they'll give me their parts list that they came up with, and luckily they already pulled the transmission for me to find all this stuff. So I will have to pay them a little bit for that labor and diagnosis, but hey, that's the bulk of the work. I've pulled the engine and trans. I've pulled the engine by itself. I've done it all before. I've had the clutch and flywheel off the car before. To my eyes, I didn't have any gauges or anything to test the flywheel, like feeler gauges or anything like that. But it looked fine to me, so that's why it stayed in. But they're saying, they've looked at it, and in their professional opinion, the flywheel is bad, and it's actually a new clutch in the car. But they're saying that the bad flywheel, they wouldn't trust the clutch.
You should change them both. You should change them both
Yeah.
if you're going to change one. So you're going to go with like a lightweight flywheel or something?
I've been considering it. They're roughly the same price as an OEM flywheel.
Race car parts always are, man. They're
I
always
know.
like...
It's so tempting.
The real reason my car is like so worked up is because the race car parts are cheaper than OEM. That's the secret. That's how you get into cars. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. You're like, oh, well, this Stage 2 Plus part is the same price. That sounds better. I'll just put that one in there. And then you keep doing that forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
I very nearly put a high performance clutch on my my Subaru, but like the cheap Chinese, I just went with the cheap Chinese OEM knockoff one, which, considering that it's like making some weird noises when I shift, maybe I should have gone with the other one. But I don't know. When I replaced the transmission on my MR2, I don't know, like 5 years ago, I went with the cheapest throw bearing from Rock Auto, and that, in hindsight, was a mistake. I also probably should have had the clutch or the flywheel resurfaced and replaced the pilot bushing on that, but I didn't, and now it's making some weird noises when it's idling. That could be something else. It could be the vent fan in the engine bay, because it's a mid-engine car. It's got a little air intake on one side, so it draws fresh air in that way, and that fan, I think, is making some noise. Or maybe it's the clutch for the air conditioning. I don't know. Whatever. Something's making noise at idle when it's cold. Whatever. Anyways, I'm sorry to take away from what you're saying.
I'm so happy over here that I
No worries.
Chevy.
Yeah, well, you've never had any problems with your cars, right?
Well, yeah, but if I blow up my motor, I'll just go to a junkyard and get a new one for $100. Which is obviously a joke. They cost like $250 at a junkyard.
Weird tangent, but I actually priced a new engine for that Audi one time just to see. I was like, man, if I catastrophically ruin this motor, what am I going to look at for a brand new one? They're about $7,500 for a long block.
I bought a 283 small block the other day because it was $100 and in good condition.
Yeah.
Wait,
I miss working on old cars.
Motor?
It was for, I believe that was for a remanufactured. The Audi one? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
I believe it was remanufactured or a rebuilt long block.
Oh, okay.
Not even a full. It wasn't a short block, but it didn't have all of the accessories on it.
That's not the worst thing in the world.
I can go to Blueprint Motors right now and order a fully dressed, like, complete carb to oil pan 383 for like 4,000, maybe 4,500.
Oh yeah,
that's an attractive option,
dude.
Yeah, and you can get like the world's nicest Subaru motor for that much money, basically.
At the same time, I will say, look, you spend that money once and it's turnkey, and it's, that's hopefully 100,000 miles at least, or more. Hopefully like 200,000. That's a lot of miles. Like, you pay that money once, it can be worth it. But that you could also buy a used one, I'm sure, for a lot less.
Oh yeah, but then you're going
like,
into.
It's not perfect, but like that's what a lot of like drift folks do. Is like I've known people who just replace 350Z motors. They're like, oh yeah, I just got a used one, and everyone I know has got like a used motor that they dropped in. For cheap. I mean, it's not perfect, but it'll get you by if you catastrophically fail.
Oh yeah.
If I can hijack the conversation for a second, my Subaru, it's a Subaru WRX. It's a badge engineered Subaru WRX that looks like a Saab. Anyways, the engine's been making some weird sounds. It's what sounds like piston slap at cold start, and the turbo is making some squeaky sounds, which either might be the wastegate actuator or the actual turbine running into the housing. I'm not entirely sure. So maybe Zach or maybe the listeners can give me some advice. Like, should I just buy a short block Subaru lightly used motor, one of those quote 60,000 mile Japanese JDM motors for like 1,000?
They're always 60,000, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to believe that. I really do.
Wow, all these motors have 60,000 miles. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I've also been contemplating getting the turbo and manifold setup for the JDM STI that had the equal length headers and the twin scroll turbo.
Oh, that would be cool.
That, boost comes. Yeah, and I think stock they make around 275 horsepower at the crank, but maybe with the mods that I've got, it might make a little bit more. But I think that turbo and manifold setup last time I checked on eBay is like, I don't know, $800 to $1,000, plus another bad. 800 to 1,000 for the motor. And of course, if I want to get the actual JDM STI motor block, that's like fucking $4,000 or something, because they're the closed deck, robust engine block. But I think 275 to 300 horsepower is within reason on a stock. What is it? EJ20, whatever I have on my 2005.
Yeah, for sure.
2-liter motor.
Yeah, I think you're looking at the upper limit of that motor is probably around just over 300 to the wheels. So I'm betting you could probably put 350 to 375 at the crank, and it would live through it. That's my approximation. My
Scientific wild ass guess.
my educated, non-educated guess.
I've heard people making with like O5s and I'm sorry, with people making like on the 05, 06 EJs, we're making. I've heard of like 4 and 500, pretty even without new internals. I thought maybe I misunderstood, but I thought they could handle more power than that.
I mean, maybe briefly. I don't know. Those are
Okay. Good to know.
I think the question there is longevity. I think you can make 500, 600 horsepower for, I don't know, a week, maybe a month. But I don't think that engine would live too much longer. Yeah. I think 350 at the crank could live a good life.
Yeah, I mean, for a while. Like, I mean, it's always going to take life off the engine, depending on how you're driving it. Like, if you're cold starting it and then going full throttle, like that.
You mean like how I drive?
That thing's gonna crack in half, within 20,000 miles or something. I don't know. I'm just pulling that number out of my ass, but
that's probably true for any engine, though, or just about. I mean, maybe a small block Chevy can handle it, just because they seem to be able to handle just about anything.
Oh no, I can through it. Trust me.
Yeah, I've seen it done.
My terrible financial advice to you, Bryant, is to buy the cheapest motor that you can to keep the car running. Pull the engine that you have in there, send it to Outfront Motorsports, have them close deck it, and then get a full twin scroll kit from Full Race Turbo Systems. They run like $6,000 to $8,000, but then you could be making 600 horsepower and have the twin scroll closed deck block. Just send it.
That'd be cool. That would be super cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need to like make a down payment on a house or anything. I just need to, upgrade my Subaru so it's worth like, $4,000 instead of $3,000.
That is
there you go.
That is definitely the assumptions I've been operating under.
Dude,
are you implying
you
that
guys about vans? You can spend all your money on them, and then when you lose your house, you still have somewhere to live.
Hey, the Subaru is a hatchback. You can kind of live in that.
Yeah. I mean, I've camped out of my Subaru. Like, if I fold down the seats, I can just about lie down in it diagonally in the back.
No, I'll tell you where it's
like,
at.
I'm not too tall.
No, you gotta get yourself a Sprinter van. Whoo, those things are the best. I lived in one for quite a while. It can be done pretty comfortably, and it's a thing, but they work. That's the van you need.
Sprinter vans are like the bougie version of van living. That's like the high class van life.
For sure. I was driving freight, so so it wasn't a fancy one.
So I'm gonna weigh in here. There's like this subtle distinction culturally between like quote unquote vanners and van lifers. Vanners are the dudes who like have like wild ass old school boogie vans, and they're all decked out on the inside for you to like camp out of or get so hammered that you can't drive and you've got somewhere to sleep. And yeah, like the Sprinter vans, that's like the van life, like doing it all for the Instagram likes and all that shit. I'm sure that there are some legit people who do that stuff, but all of the ones I meet seem like tools.
Oh, I'm just saying. I'm not even saying like, oh, you got to make it all pretty inside. I lived in one like sleeping, on an air mattress with a sleeping bag. You can make it work. They're very spacious when you don't have freight in the back.
Weren't you hauling freight though?
Well, yeah. So yes, but usually it was only taking up like half the back, and I'd still have room to sleep. But sometimes I would have to sleep in the seat. Yeah, but even that wasn't so bad.
You've told me that was a bad job. I think it's really sinking
it was
in
the worst.
Right now how bad that job was.
Oh, I will tell the story. It was so bad. But I will say the Sprinter van was okay. It was a decent vehicle. So if you need a van, there's something to consider. They're expensive as shit to fix, though. I just didn't have to pay for it, but it sounded expensive. Anyway, I'm done hijacking the conversation. I'm sorry.
No, I think we've all taken our turn at hijacking. Or at least I have. I mean, at one point I was definitely considering living in a van down by the river. And I would probably go with like a, I don't know, around 2000-ish Chevy full-size van if I was going to do that. And I think, Brandon, we talked about this, but I would kind of want to put a wood-burning stove in the back of it. Like, I'm sure that's a terrible idea for many reasons, but I think it would be cool.
It is a terrible idea,
heat
but
your
it would
van.
be cool. It would be cool.
I mean, maybe put it as far away from the fuel tank and fuel lines as you can, but like,
I
I don't
mean,
know. I think it would be cool.
I honestly, like, I don't think it would be that awful in terms of safety, but you are talking about throwing something that weighs like a couple, 200-300 pounds into the back of the van. So there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like some functional like difficulties in doing that, but it's been done before.
Okay. So Brandon, what have you been working on? I know I caught the end of the conversation about your what is it, Cutlass that you had some.
Oh yeah, I gotta replace the alternator because I think when I had all the electrical problems, I fried the voltage regulator in it. So I have to do that, and I put it off because I've been working on the heat in my house, but the heat in my house seems to be working properly now. Yeah, this week. What's up?
We were all cheering.
celebrating.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. I'm very happy. For a good week, I was very on edge, like going into the basement like twice a day, seeing if something's exploded yet. But it seems to be working properly. The alternator and the Cutlass. That's like every time I've done an alternator in the last like however many years, it was like something where I was replacing the alternator on something that was still externally regulated from 50 years ago, or like the wiring was a hatchet job or something. So like I kind of forgot that they're super easy if you don't have a weird setup. So I looked at mine and it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go swap in a new alternator in it this week, and hopefully that's the last thing it needs. Like it was shredding belts because the alternator was getting so hot that it was melting them.
Nice.
Yeah, you're not supposed to put out 19 volts at idle.
Oh.
So yeah, that's all I've really worked on. No, I haven't even worked on the car. I've just kind of slacked off and monitored the heat in my house, and that's it.
Well, thinking about working on the car counts.
Oh well, then I never stop. Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. So just so anyone knows, that's part of it. I'm thinking about working on it all the time, so I'm always working on it.
Yeah.
Doing that mental work, you know?
Yep. I mean, it's not entirely a joke. I mean, I don't know. It consumes a great deal of my life.
I have like the classic Protestant work ethic, so I always feel like I should be doing something. Like relaxing is kind of stressful for me in a weird way. So I'm constantly thinking about like what I need to be doing to this thing or the other thing, and it just like because I can't stop. It's compulsive, but I don't think it's healthy to a certain extent.
I kind of identify with that a little bit. Like I always got to be cleaning, or I somehow have more errands to run than most people. Like, so there's I got to do this today. My girlfriend's often like, you don't have to do any of that shit. Like none of it. That's not like you don't have to do any of this. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but I have to. I need my car because I need to do all this work. And she's like, no, you don't actually. Which is how I was convinced that like I could be without a car for a while. So I feel you, Brandon. Always got to be like, I got to be working on something. I got to be studying something or whatever.
I haven't touched any of my vans in like a month because I just have had to deal with the heating situation in my house, and I just feel like such a lazy piece of shit now.
Gotta love that part of it.
I guess so.
Yeah, I always set like a goal of doing like 10 things over the weekend, and I usually do about 5 of them. But whatever. It's always I don't know.
Hey,
I don't know if it's the important things that gets
500,
done or. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
That's like I'm just shocked that I just made like a sports reference. So that won't happen often.
Let's see. Unless anyone has anything else, I think I'll just start talking about nuclear-powered vehicles here.
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Cool. All right. Well, so I've got a bunch of notes and links and stuff, and I'll post stuff in the Slack here, so y'all can see photos and whatever. And then also, I'll put that in the notes for the listener. We'll find a way to do that. But like I said, during the Cold War, especially like in the 50s and 60s, there was, I don't know, this weird mix of like optimism and doom connected to atomic technology. Like, on the one hand, there was all these people saying like, oh, there's going to be electrical power that's so cheap that we're not going to even charge money for it. We're just going to or too cheap to meter, I think. Yes.
We're going to beat the communists by being communists.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically, there was all this optimism for nuclear technology. Like, I don't know if any of you have seen that 1960s. I think it was a British show called The Thunderbirds with like the puppets, the marionettes.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that was British. I remember seeing that one as a kid.
Yeah, and like I think like all their rockets were nuclear powered. Like their house had like a nuclear powered oven in it and stuff like that. So like all these people were coming up with ideas to use nuclear technology, and but then there was also like the threat of nuclear war was out there and very real. So I don't know. It's kind of I can kind of identify with that sort of sense of dread today. What with coronavirus and climate change and fascism
and still nuclear weapons. Don't forget, they're still a threat.
Oh yeah.
They're still there.
Yeah, we'll get to that. One of the projects was still being worked on as late as 2018 that I'm going to talk about. So
sweet.
Yeah. Let's see, and it's kind of interesting because like a lot of the thanks to Operation Paperclip, a lot of the projects that I'm going to talk about were built by war criminals, and if any of these were actually used, they would constitute war crimes. Probably many of them.
Well, America's never cared about that. Don't you worry. That's never gotten in our way before. We won't start now.
Yeah. So this list I have is mostly chronological. A lot of it came from the book Atomic Adventures by James Mahaffey. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Mahaffey. It's a really good book. He also wrote a book called Atomic Accidents, which is just about how people fucked up and died from, doing nuclear research or whatever. All the ways that radiation could kill you, and there are many. None of them are good. Oh, and by the way, if I say nuclear instead of nuclear, please don't judge me. I have a hard time telling the difference. Apparently, Jimmy Carter, who was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, sometimes said nuclear. So, whatever.
That's just how speech works sometimes.
Exactly.
I didn't know. Is there a correct way for sure?
Yeah, it's nuclear.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Simpsons moments is when Homer like really condescendingly tells someone it's pronounced nuclear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like...
Yeah, it's like a bunch of consonants jammed in there and you want to put a vowel and, break it up, but I don't know.
Makes sense.
So the earliest, I guess, description of a nuclear-powered vehicle was in 1914. The novel The World Set Free by H.G. Wells was the first to describe nuclear-powered vehicles that I could find. And then I also found mention of a radium-powered car concept in the 1930s, or 1903, excuse me. But then some physicists in the 1930s did a study on that, and they found that it would require 50 tons of radiation shielding. So it was not a practical solution.
Well, you just got to make more low-end torque to, all the extra 50 tons.
Yeah.
Put a towing cam in there.
Well, we're getting to that. So in 1941, Dr. R.M. Langler, a Caltech physicist, published a story in Popular Mechanics, which has always been the bastion of truth and, restraint in engineering.
Yeah, they never sensationalize anything, to my knowledge.
Yeah. And this whole story is on Google Books. It's pretty hilarious. He talks about making a nuclear-powered car with a power plant the size of a typewriter, and it combines the nuclear reactor and a steam turbine in one unit. The fuel would be about a pound of uranium-235, which would give you a range of about 5,000 miles. And then he also designed roads that would be made by melting dirt into lava with portable nuclear furnaces. So you'd have like just this big paving machine with a nuclear reactor in it that rolls across the countryside, melting everything underneath it.
Hold on. All right, this is starting to sound like pretty good ideas. I can see how I can see. I was like, okay, I'm on board with this.
I mean, it all sounds very.
Wait, is it just blasting the dirt with radiation until it like melts?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Make a road anywhere. This is great.
Yeah, it's perfectly safe. He also had an idea for rocket-powered airplanes that would have a nuclear reactor that vaporized steel. So, just have molten steel vapor flying out the back, and it would just fall to Earth as harmless dust. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
No, that's great, because I had an idea for airplane-powered rockets, and it was actually didn't really go over that well. So rocket-powered airplanes makes a lot more sense.
Well, I mean, there have been rocket-powered airplanes, like was it X-15? I think there was a German one during World War II also, but
whatever. There's rocket-powered cars if you look.
Yeah, totally. Fucking.
Which we got to talk about that at some point. I've heard those at the track. I don't I don't think I've ever seen one go down, but like while I'm out drifting, they'll like, oh yeah, it's the jet car is going to go down the track now, and you hear it start, and you're like, what is happening?
Oh, like drag racing?
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah. I hear them at the drag track all the time.
They're a little bit less impressive than you think because they don't accelerate as quickly as a lot of like just regular gas engine cars do. Like they're faster, but you got to give them like a mile-long track.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just know that they sound outrageous. Like, because I hear them like I'm in grid waiting to go start a drift run, and like you just hear it, and you're like, "There's a jet taking off." Like I don't feel okay with this. It's too much. Anyway, I'm sorry. I had to.
No, that's good. And that reminds me, like I think before, I don't know, the 1950s or maybe early 60s, there wasn't really a like linguistic distinction between jets and rockets. That's why JPL is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where they mostly do rockets.
Gotcha.
Well, they do some witchcraft too, I think.
Yeah. Who was that guy that was doing the black magic? What was that dude's name?
It's Jack Parsons.
Yes, you're right.
L. Ron Hubbard's buddy.
Yeah, he was a weird guy.
Yeah.
But anyways, like, so if I'm talking about a jet, it means like self-contained. It, you're taking the propellant with you. If I'm talking about, or did I fuck that up? That's a rocket. Okay. A jet it breathes air. It's taking air from the atmosphere and, burning fuel or compressing it or heating it or some variety of that. Hey, this is Brian from the future editing the podcast. I just flubbed a couple things here, so I'm setting the record straight. A jet engine takes air from the outside, compresses it with a turbine, adds fuel, burns it, passes that hot gas through a turbine, which then spins the compressor, and then the exhaust gases go out the back to propel the airplane. So it's a type of internal combustion engine. that breathes air from the outside. A rocket engine, on the other hand, takes the fuel and oxidizer with it, so it doesn't take any air out of the atmosphere to breathe. It usually has a fuel such as like kerosene, liquid hydrogen, something along those lines, sometimes alcohol or whatever, and then an oxidizer, which is usually liquid oxygen, peroxide, something that when they combine, they react and create fire, basically, that goes through a nozzle and out the back of the aircraft or rocket or whatever the vehicle is to propel it. So there's the only moving parts in a rocket are usually the pumps to pump the fuel in the oxidizer, and some even don't have that. They just have a tank of pressure that pushes the fuel out through the nozzles and everything. So that's the difference. The basic distinction is a jet is what powers an airplane or a drag racing car, for exhibition that Connor was talking about, and a rocket is what flies into space where there's no air. Anyways, in December 1945, John Wilson of London announced he had created an atomic car. This created considerable interest. The Ministry of Fuel and Power, along with a large press contingent, turned out to view it. The car did not show, and Wilson claimed that it had been sabotaged. A later court case found that he was a fraud and there was no nuclear powered car.
So he pulled a Tucker Carlson. We have
Tucker
the
Carlson.
evidence, but it was stolen from the mail.
Yes, exactly. I wasn't quite sure what you were saying there, but yes.
Okay, great, cool, got it.
Yeah, and some of this I'm just going to be reading from Wikipedia links. Let's see. Oh, and so it wasn't until 1954 that the first real nuclear-powered vehicle was built, the USS Nautilus submarine. And I don't really want to talk about nuclear-powered submarines or aircraft carriers that much. Like, I think it's kind of boring. But the Nautilus was kind of interesting because it was the first one to go underneath the Arctic ice. They used it for a lot of, PR stuff, but it was like a functional Navy ship. The Soviet Union followed in 1958 with the K-3 Leninsky Komsomol.
Leninsky Komsomol.
Whatever. It's a submarine. One kind of interesting note about the U.S. nuclear program, it was kind of the baby of this guy named Admiral Hyman G. Rickover. Yes, his first name was Hyman.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and if you listen to all the weird thorium reactor cranks on the internet, he is basically the devil because he invested early in pressurized water reactors with enriched uranium. And this is basically like what most nuclear reactors, either in a boat or in, land-based reactors, use this design. So that's why, they say, oh, we got stuck in the Rickover trap of using this uranium power. We really should be using thorium, which is much better. Which, yeah, maybe, but what are you going to do about it? So also, Russia uses lots of nuclear-powered icebreaker ships. That's kind of interesting. But I also found there's a few, or at least there were a few, nuclear-powered cargo ships. There was the Japanese Mutsu, the German Otto Hahn, both of which were later converted to diesel power because no ports wanted to actually allow nuclear-powered vehicles in them. They're scared of it for whatever reason. And then there was the American NS Savannah, whatever, the city in Georgia. So NS stands for nuclear ship. And that one's kind of interesting because it was designed as a bulk cargo / passenger ship. Basically, bulk cargo was before container ships. They just loaded everything into a big hole in the ship, one piece at a time, or in crates or whatever. And it still exists, although it's being decommissioned in like Maryland or something. And then there was also the Soviet Sevmorput,
Sevmorput.
which is actually still in service. It's in, I believe, the Pacific Ocean. So like in the port cities, sort of like north of Japan, runs a route there. And that one was, I believe it was a, oh shoot, I forget the name for it, but it's basically like in between bulk cargo and container. They had this other system where they like loaded up barges with cargo, and then they would put the barges on top of the ship. It was a really weird system, but I think nowadays it's just containers is what they use on that. They're called lighters. I forgot the word there. So, and check out the photos of the Savannah. It's pretty cool. Like they were one of the first ships to have a microwave oven in the kitchen. So it was pretty high tech for its day. And then in 1955, Chrysler presented a design for the TV-8, a very weird tank with the engine and crew in a giant turret, and then a small set of electrically driven tracks underneath. So like most tanks, you have the chassis with the engine and the driver and the treads and everything. And then you have the turret that just has the gun on it and the gunner. They combined everything into the turret and then just the tracks underneath it.
Huh.
It looks super weird. I'll post the link here. So they never built it other than just a mock-up. But at one point, there was a design to use a compact nuclear reactor for the power plant. They also had designs for a gas turbine engine, a vapor cycle engine like the naphtha launch that we were talking about before, and then also just a Chrysler V8. And they also designed it to be
I'd rather
amphibious.
have Mopar than no car.
I like how it's like, well, we could do nuclear power, or we could just put a Chrysler V8 in there.
Yeah.
I love it. You know it was a 440.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was no other engine in my mind.
And I want to say like someone made a mod for like World of Tanks that you can drive one of these, or one of those tank shoot 'em up games. I'm not really a gamer, but yeah, it's just super weird looking. Like they also designed it so it would float, it would be amphibious, and then it had like a little jet ski impeller on the back to push it along.
That's kind of funny. I bet it moved at like 3 miles per hour though.
Right. So there's been a couple different designs for nuclear-powered trains. So as early as 1956, the Soviet Ministry of Transportation explored the possibility of... the idea was to have nuclear locomotives for like remote routes out in Siberia, so you wouldn't need to like truck fuel out there or move fuel out there. And the idea was also that you could provide electrical power to a small town in case of an emergency. So you could just roll into town and hook your train up to the power grid and power the whole town that way.
So hold on, did they ever create this? Because it again sounds like kind of a good idea. I'm very on board with most of these these applications.
No. Well, I mean, the problem is what happens when it crashes, right?
Who cares?
Like, so I know that in Russia they have made use nuclear aircraft carriers or submarines or other nuclear powered ships for similar emergency power situations. And I think they also did just like they put a nuclear reactor on a barge just for that purpose. And that works fine, but no one's done it on a train before, as far as I know.
Well, see, I feel like I get why a nuclear powered car not a great idea. Train, however, jury's still out for me. I get it.
I mean, it makes a little bit more sense. Like, I guess
if it works
most
in a
of
sub, it should work in a train. Is my thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, also the University of Utah also explored this concept. So, like, one of the links I posted, it has like a big illustration of of the sort of like cutaway view of the train and like all the components in it. And they have a whole car in the back that's just the radiator because it produces so much heat.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you think about it, all the high speed trains in France that are electric are mostly nuclear powered because France gets a lot of their power from nuclear reactors, and that seems to be like the easier and safer solution. Is just
yeah, okay.
Have the, what do you call it, the pantograph on top of the train that gets power from stationary nuclear reactor.
Oh wait, I think I misheard you. You said that they don't actually have nuclear trains. Their trains are just electric and get powered by like nuclear.
Yes.
Okay, I follow you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone's actually built a nuclear powered train. Like it's possible, but again, what happens when it crashes?
I feel like trains don't crash very often. They're on set tracks. I mean, it happens, but in America, it happens in America. I don't think it happens anywhere else.
Oh, it definitely happens in England.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah. Well, there was that thing a couple years ago in, was it Canada or like on the border of Canada and the U.S. where that
Seattle.
train crashed? And
See, again, it was America where we don't do anything about our infrastructure, so everything's outdated. I'm just saying, you got like Japan and China with like real trains. I think they'd probably be pretty good.
Yeah, and I read some sci-fi book where they had nuclear powered trains, but it was like seen as a weird thing. But anyway, that's another story.
Yep. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. I wasn't trying to hurry us along. I don't know. I was just thinking in my ADD way. Let's see. So in the late 50s, there were a few different concept cars that explored the idea of nuclear power. Probably the most famous is the 1957 Ford Nucleon concept. This is a sleek two-seater to be powered by a miniaturized submarine reactor. And the idea was that it could be swapped out at a gas station. Yeah. Just pull in there, park it over the lift and say, hey, swap out the reactor for me.
Oh boy, I know people who have 240s that are like that. Oh no, I'm going to swap the engine this month. Oh, that one ran out of gas. I needed a different engine now.
Pretty much. Yeah. So again, they were saying it would last 5,000 miles. But of course, that miniaturized reactor design never materialized. And it seems also no one thought about what would happen if it crashed. So they only built a scale model. It does look pretty cool, but...
Well, I mean, how common really are car crashes?
Right, yeah. It never happens.
Now, I know I personally have only been in a few.
Yeah, and, it wouldn't really have mattered if someone had set off a dirty bomb during that car crash, right? So there's a few other manufacturers that designed nuclear-powered concept cars. There was the 1957 Studebaker... Was it Studebaker or Packard? Astral, which had a single gyroscopic wheel. So it was like a self-balancing, what do you call it? Mono wheel sort of deal. Oh,
that's outrageous.
Yeah. There was the 57 Arbel Symmetric, which had glow-in-the-dark bumpers.
Okay, that I kind of like. I'm with that.
Yeah. Yeah, they were all just throwing shit out there in the 50s.
Were they glowing in the dark because they were so radioactive?
I mean, probably. They probably put fucking radium in the bumpers. There's other podcasts that have talked about the radium girls. If you want to be horrified about, people's jaws falling off, check that out. Let's see. There was the 58 Simca Fulgur, whatever, something French, which had a radar guidance system. So, before radar cruise control was a thing. The 1962 Ford Seattle Light. So like Seattle, the city, satellite. Haha, get it?
Womp
Which
womp.
had 6 wheels.
Okay, I'm on board.
And then in 2013, Cadillac came out with the World Thorium Fuel concept.
Yeah, that thing's pretty wild looking.
Yeah. And then also in the Fallout games, there was nuclear powered cars, which I think they blew up if you shoot them.
Most spectacularly, they do.
Yeah. I haven't played those, but my brother was into it. So this next one, I'm not sure if it really counts as a nuclear powered vehicle because it wasn't designed as a vehicle. It didn't carry anything, and it might have been vaporized right immediately after it left the ground. So if it did survive, it was and still is probably the fastest nuclear powered vehicle ever built. It was sort of a unusual side effect of the Pascal B underground nuclear bomb test. And this was part of a larger series of tests called Operation Plum Bob, which you should read about it if you got some time. They killed like 1,000 pigs just to see what would happen to people at different distances from the epicenter of an explosion.
Grizzly.
Just lined up. Yeah, they just lined up a bunch of pigs and
Okay.
nuked them.
I don't approve of this.
God.
Yeah, not vegan friendly.
I feel like we had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen to like 990 of them. I get maybe the last 10. Okay, maybe we need to say what happens at this distance, but like the first 990, we knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. They also tested an air-to-air missile with a nuclear warhead that they exploded 20,000 feet above the test site. And they had a bunch of military officers standing below ground zero just to see how safe it was, you know.
Nice. Oof, that is... Boy, you want to serve your country. This is what it takes. Oh, man. So how did did you happen to look into how those wonderful, brave men and women's... Well, men at the time. Definitely just men. How did they fare?
As far as I could tell, they all survived, unscathed. I don't think any of them died of cancer,
Okay, statistically, some of them had to have died from cancer.
Well, some of them definitely did.
Right.
But interesting. That's okay.
Yeah. If you want to, that reminds me, there was a movie in the 60s called The Conqueror starring John Wayne where he played Genghis Khan.
Oh, God.
Which is just as terrible as you can imagine.
I don't know. My ability to imagine terribleness is pretty extensive.
Yeah. And I think it was directed or produced by Howard Hughes. And they filmed it in the Nevada desert, sort of downwind from all the nuclear testing. And something like 30% of the cast and crew died of cancer. So, yeah, that was not fun. But anyways,
was it profitable? Was it profitable though for the shareholders?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, did they still turn a profit after the settlements and all? That's important.
Yeah, I'm sure Howard Hughes, was able to buy plenty of piss jars in his later years. But yeah, so Pascal B was it was part of a series of underground tests meant to study fallout contamination. It was a bomb that was equivalent to 300 tons of TNT, so pretty small, smaller than like Hiroshima. And they put it in a 500 foot deep borehole. So they dug a hole 500 foot deep, put the bomb at the bottom, poured a little bit of concrete over the top of the bomb, and then put a 1-ton steel cap on top and welded it in place.
Yep.
Yeah. And astrophysicist Bob Brownlee was in charge of this test, and he predicted that welding the cap on would do nothing to contain the blast, but thought, hey, what the hell, we'll go along with it. So when the bomb was detonated, it vaporized the concrete, which
Sure.
expanded straight up the test shaft, and it launched the cap into the atmosphere at a speed of more than 125,000 miles per hour. Which
So hold on.
which
So wait.
is
So I'm confused because NASA isn't using this to launch rockets. Why is that?
well, we'll get to that. So if it survived the atmospheric friction, it would have been going about 5 times the Earth's escape velocity, and it would be off, beyond Pluto or whatever by now. But they only saw it in one frame of the film. So they're like, in between when we triggered the blast and this frame of film, it was here. So it might have been actually going faster than that.
It was still accelerating when they timed it.
Yeah. So like, they're like, yeah, it was probably going this fast. We don't know. So this was in August of 1957. So it would have beat Sputnik into space by 2 months.
Hey,
But,
take that, commies.
Yeah, I mean, it probably burned up in the atmosphere, but that's boring. So I choose to believe that it's off in space somewhere.
I like to believe it's off in space somewhere. Wow, that's that's pretty impressive. Okay.
Yeah. So the next year, in 1958, work began on Project Orion, which was a more formalized plan to use nuclear explosions to propel a spaceship. This was actually a concept that was started or came up with earlier by physicist Stanislav Ulam. But this project was headed up by Ted Taylor of General Atomics and British physicist Freeman Dyson of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. And both of these were basically like Cold War think tanks where they just like, shoveled a bunch of money at people to like come up with weird shit. And the basic idea was to build this freaking huge spaceship that weighed over 800 tons. And at the bottom of it, it had a pusher plate with massive springs and shock absorbers in between it and the main body of the spaceship. And then small nuclear bombs would be ejected out the bottom of the ship and explode a few hundred feet underneath the pusher plate. And then the shock absorbers would sort of smooth out the acceleration for the passengers.
Naturally, yeah.
Did you say that?
Yeah.
Did you say that the Acme Corporation was behind this? That sounds like some Looney Tunes bullshit. There is no way
pretty much
that was ever going to work.
Yeah.
The extra wild part was their test animal was a coyote. His name was Wiley. There's a lot of documentary films about him from back in the day.
I'll have to look into those. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, they usually resulted pretty poorly for him. He was resilient though.
Yeah, and they actually consulted. I think it was Coca-Cola vending machine division on how to push the nuclear bombs out the back.
Oh, come on, that's just comedy right there.
Yeah. And they had a mechanism where they would like change the yield of the bombs on the fly. I don't quite understand the mechanism for that, but like the idea was, if we want to, really put the pedal to the metal, we'll dial up the yield on these bombs. But if we just want to cruise, we'll make them a little bit more mild.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you launched it from the surface level, just from the ground, it would require between 800 and 1,000 warheads exploding underneath it to reach orbit. This was kind of frowned upon by, let's say, the people that came up with the nuclear test ban treaty, and also just like environmentalists, with fallout and all that kind of thing.
So it would take like 800 to 1,000 like warhead grade explosions just to get into orbit.
Yeah, they were relatively small warheads. I forget exactly, but like a few kiloton,
Okay.
something like that. And they came up with plans for a few different sizes of spaceships. The largest was an interplanetary exploration ship that would weigh 10,000 tons. And they had like, oh, hey, we're going to go fucking visit Jupiter and then Saturn. And then they had this whole route planned out. It's very optimistic. Like, this is the optimism part of the
Clearly.
thing. Yeah. So as I said, there was this pesky thing called the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty that kind of put the kibosh on it. Also, Kennedy came and saw like some of the work that they had been doing and is like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? And kind of canceled the program. They did test a few scale models with conventional explosives, so no nuclear bombs. And it seemed to work pretty well. Like, they made this little rocket with a shock absorber on the back and set off some bombs underneath it, and it flew up in the air. And yeah, hey, come on. And at one point, they transferred it from NASA to, I think, the Air Force. And the idea was like, we can deliver, 1,000 troops to any corner of the world in like 20 minutes with this thing.
Oh, see, that's the real benefit there. That's what we really needed.
Yeah.
Troops anywhere in the planet, anytime. That's what we need.
Well, that was before we figured out that it was an easier plan to just already have that many troops on every corner.
Yeah, that's been working well. Plus, I mean, we got SpaceX creating new little rocket cargo ships that'll carry supplies to anywhere in the world. That's great. That's wonderful ingenuity, and it'll help perpetuate our global hegemonic power, I guess.
I believe what you were looking for is intergalactic hegemonic power.
Beautiful, yeah.
Space Force. Space Force, man. Yeah, so there's a few different concepts. Like they talked about just not launching nuclear bombs on the surface, but putting everything into space and then setting off the bombs. There was also a concept called Medusa, which instead of the pusher plate, it had a big old parachute in front of the ship and then a spool of steel cable rather than the shock absorbers. So like the bomb would go off, the parachute would go out in front, the spool would unspool. So it'd be like, a fishing line going out, and then you would reel it back in. And this had the added benefit of, you could put an electrical generator on the spool. And so when it unspools, you're creating electricity, and then you're using the electric motor to pull you back in place. Huh. So that was never tested. It was just a concept that someone came up with. And there's a really cool documentary that the BBC did a few years ago called The Secret History of Project Orion to Mars and Back by A-Bomb. It's on YouTube. I'll post a link here. And it's got interviews with Freeman Dyson and his son George, who wrote a book about the project, which I might have to pick up that book eventually. It sounds pretty interesting. And then there's been a few fictional versions of this concept. There's a novel, Footfall, by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, which I read that book. I thought it kind of sucked. And then there's a TV show called Ascension, which takes place on one of these ships, where it's like a colony ship to Alpha Centauri or something that takes off like in the late 60s, I think. I haven't watched it. I think it's on Amazon or something.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, it sounds kind of interesting. So maybe if I'm really bored, I'll pay to watch that someday. I forgot why I put this in here, but I have in my notes. This is like semi-automated luxury straight space capitalism.
Oh, yeah. So. Of course, it could never be achieved naturally.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect, though.
So the next three projects were all sort of part of one category. These were vehicles designed in the 50s and early 60s to deliver nuclear bombs across continents before the invention of ICBMs or lightweight hydrogen bombs. So, now
ICBM, that's intercontinental bowel movement, right?
Bowel movement? No, unfortunately,
right.
Intercontinental ballistic missiles. So before Sputnik and whatever the American one was, there was, you had to put things in bombers and fly them across the ocean. And a lot of the bombs were, big and heavy. Like think of Fat Man. Hold on. I'm going to blow my nose. Hopefully we can edit this out.
Oh, that wasn't that bad. We don't have to edit nothing out. The listeners we have bodily functions, all right? The listeners can know that.
No, I'm just a brain in a jar. Don't break the illusion. Okay, so all three of these projects at one point in the design process would use a different variant of the same air-cooled reactor design with ceramic and or graphite core support structures. So these were nuclear jet engines and rocket engines. And they promised the necessary thrust and range for nuclear bombers and nuclear-powered ICBMs. Before the advent of ICBMs, the Soviet Union and the U.S. built huge fleets of bombers like the B-52 and the Tu-95 as part of the Cold War brinksmanship. The Strategic Air Command at one point had bombers circling continuously over the Arctic, ready to cross over into Soviet airspace and rain death upon our commie enemies. Check out the documentary Dr. Strangelove for more info on that. But, that had the disadvantage of requiring stopovers in Greenland for refueling or, mid-air refueling, which hadn't really been totally figured out yet. And someone was thinking, what if a bomber could stay aloft and ready for months at a time, kind of like how a nuclear-powered submarine can stay underwater for months at a time?
Makes sense.
So someone read a lot of comic books and got inspired.
Yeah, someone read that Popular Mechanics article and is like, oh, okay. So this was the motivation for the Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Project. It began as early as 1946, and then it split into two separate designs developed by General Electric and Pratt & Whitney. The direct cycle engines developed by GE would resemble a conventional jet engine, except instead of combustion chambers, the air from the compressor section would be directed into the nuclear reactor core, heating up the air. And then it would be directed back through the turbine to provide power for the compressor, and then out the exhaust to make thrust. So they actually built a prototype of this engine, and they tested it on the ground, but they never achieved the intended power level. And, it was pretty heavy with all the radiation shielding and whatnot. And it had the drawback of spewing radioactive particles out the exhaust. And it was canceled after the reactor melted down during testing. Yeah. They decided not the best design. Pratt & Whitney developed an indirect cycle engine in which the reactor heated a fluid such as water or molten sodium, and then that was pumped into heat exchangers in the engines. This had the advantage of spreading less radiation into the air, but it was much heavier and more complex. And also, if you know anything about sodium, pure metallic sodium, when you expose it to oxygen or water, it catches fire and produces sodium hydroxide, which is lye, like what you make soap out of, which is very caustic. If you've seen the documentary Fight Club, where Ed Norton gets his hand burned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got some problems.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people in the 50s and 60s trying to make sodium-cooled reactors. I don't know why it sounds like a terrible idea. Another bad, downside of that is if you have to shut off the reactor, it all turns solid again, and then your reactor core is like encased in solid sodium. Yeah. So this reactor was never installed in an aircraft, although that didn't stop the Air Force from commissioning designs for the proposed NX-2A bomber, which was, I think it was based on a B-29, modified B-29. So this project required a lot of testing because no one knew what would happen to common aircraft parts when exposed to high levels of radiation. So they built the NX-2A was not based off of a B-29. It was its own thing. It was like a Delta Wing bomber. Anyways, so they built this testing rig at the Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory, and this was very close to where James Mahaffey lived. So he's got a detailed part in his book, Atomic Adventures, about this testing rig. It's, for anyone that has the book following along at home, it's pages 79 to 80 of Atomic Adventures. And I'll also post an article from a local newspaper about this testing rig. But basically, they had a nuclear reactor in a pit, in a shed, and then an automated railroad running past the pit in the shed. So they'd take samples of aircraft parts and they'd put them on the train cars. They'd roll them up next to this pit. And then after everyone was safely away, the reactor would be turned on, and then it would lift into the air on a hydraulic ram right next to the train car. So shooting radiation out into the train car, and then they would lower it down. The train cars would be moved to a shed. They'd let them cool off for a couple days, and then they'd use like remote control robots to study the samples. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to read from this book, Atomic Adventures. In June 1959, the radiation effects reactor was first run at full power for an extended time and managed to kill every living thing within 1,000 feet, with the possible exception of weeds. Pine trees seemed the most sensitive, while crabgrass seemed immune. So, pausing for a second for commentary. Basically, they didn't have any radiation shielding around this reactor. They had just a fence around the building, 1,000 feet back or so, and then they had a bunker where all the controls were. So, let's see. Oak trees became confused as to when leaves should be shed, and new buds developed. In one extended power run, the landscape around the reactor received a radiation dose equivalent to the fallout from large-scale nuclear warfare. The landscape dosage was up to 100,000 rads. The lab personnel noticed a phenomenon which they called instant taxidermy, in which if a small animal, such as a toad or a bird, happened to be near the reactor building during a power run, the unfortunate creature would perish, along with all the bacteria on, in, or around it, leading to interesting preservation. One big question for the nuclear aircraft program concerned the effect that a flyover would have on crops and farm animals, and much animal work was planned. Many rats died for their country at the GNAL. The largest organism to be hosed down with radiation was a mule. Imagine, if you will, a dead, thoroughly irradiated mule that will not degrade normally over time.
I don't want to imagine that.
There was another extended full power run in August of 1960. By that time, the ANP program was in deep kimchi. Not sure what that means. As the rapid development of guided missile was obsoleting the need for manned bombers of dubious utility. The Air Force was digesting the data from the lab in Georgia and other test sites, and was beginning to realize the hazards involved with flying this nuclear-powered gizmo. Rubber airplane tires, as it turns out, turn liquid under radiation bombardment. Hydraulic fluid turns into chewing gum, and solid-state electronic circuitry stops working. It was seriously suggested that older pilots be used beyond the age of fathering children to minimize genetic mutations due to radiation exposure in the cockpit.
This is normal. This is
Yeah,
normal
yeah.
things to think about. Oh my god.
The program was canceled, and the latest findings caused the AEC to forbid the Air Force from flying the nuclear bomber over the U.S.
Thank God.
Oh no.
And that was pages 65 and 67. Sorry, I think I said something wrong before. So yeah, turns out this was not such a good idea. The Soviets also explored this concept, and they started working on their own design with a Tu-95 bomber, but they ran into the same problems. So both the U.S. and the USSR, they did a little test where they, made a nuclear reactor and flew it in a regular bomber. So just put it in the bomb bay with a bunch of radiation shielding around it just to see if it would work to fly a nuclear reactor around. It wasn't actually powering the engines or anything. But the Soviets, thought, hey, this is a dumb idea. There's how are you going to service this thing when it's on the ground? That was part of the testing at the Georgia laboratory. And also, what happens if it crashes? It's going to be pretty terrible. They did kind of get one over on the U.S. They made a hoax in 1958 where they sort of leaked it to American spies that they were testing a prototype M50 bomber with a nuclear power plant. And it was actually reported in the magazine Aviation Week, but it was just a hoax to fuck with the Americans, I guess.
Did it work?
No.
I mean, okay.
No, did the hoax work?
Oh, the hoax worked, yeah. I mean, they figured it out eventually, but
did they start we got to start doing this?
I think the Americans started their project first. It was in the early 50s, and then the Soviets got wind of it and said, "Hey, maybe we should look into this too." And they very quickly realized, no, this is a dumb idea. The Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory was actually being used up until the 70s, I think, just in case they decided to, reopen the project. After this airplane project was canceled, they still were testing, various materials to see what happened. Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's why we can't have free college or Medicare college. Because when the projects get canceled, they have to keep running just in case.
Yeah. Oh, and one little tidbit. I think it's in the article that I posted, but when they were building the laboratory, they had to clear a bunch of trees, and I guess because of some secrecy or whatever, they couldn't get the trees out and just sell them. So they just piled them up and burned them in a giant bonfire. And a bunch of the locals were like, what the fuck is going on there? There's just this giant, glow coming from the side of the hill over there.
So it raised more questions.
Yeah.
Interesting how that happened. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, to celebrate their discretion, they had the largest bonfire ever.
Yeah.
That's like when I routinely celebrate my sobriety by getting shit-faced hammered.
Yeah, we're nothing to see here, just burning a lot of stuff for no reason. Don't worry. Okay, so the next project is probably the most batshit crazy plan that I've seen. Well, I mean, it's up there with Project Orion, blowing up bombs underneath you. But this is Project Pluto, which I'm pretty sure was conceived by cold-eyed psychopaths. This would definitely be a war crime if it was ever used. It was a nuclear-powered cruise missile powered by a supersonic ramjet engine. So kind of similar to GE's direct cycle engine, but without the turbines and compressors. So a ramjet has no moving parts. It's basically, you have to get up to a certain speed for it to work, and then the air coming in is compressed with a nozzle and then heated up. Usually you burn fuel to do this, but they were using a nuclear reactor to heat up the air. And then it expands out the back, and you got thrust. So the idea was you would launch this with some regular rocket boosters, And then once up to speed, the reactor would be brought up to criticality. And then at that point, the missile could fly around for several months at a time before it ran out of fuel. And the idea was you'd just have it circling up above, like in the Arctic Circle or like, I don't know, around Alaska.
Or a country you didn't like.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
letting them know that the bomb's like there.
Yeah, and then when you needed it, it would drop to low altitude to avoid radar. And it was able to contain multiple warheads. So it could, drop warheads on several different targets along a path. And then, of course, it would be spewing all kinds of harmful radiation along the way. So, like, imagine that poor mule in Georgia, but it's in, Siberia somewhere, getting nuked along the way. Mm-hmm. And then once it dropped all the bombs, it could either fly around for a little while and irradiate the area some more, or just crash into a target and make a dirty bomb,
Wonderful.
All right.
How nice.
Yeah. Like I said, cold-eyed psychopaths.
Yeah.
So they had to create a lot of new technologies for this project, like the guidance system, a lot of metallurgy and material science. They made pneumatic motors that had to operate while red hot and being irradiated. Basically pneumatic motors to move the control rods in and out of the reactor. And then the reactor, I thought this was kind of funny. It was codenamed Tory, like the British Conservative Party. And it had to survive high temperatures and conditions that would melt the metals used in most jet and rocket engines. So they used ceramic fuel elements, and these were actually manufactured at the Coors Porcelain Company in Golden, Colorado, which I used to live about 4 blocks away from.
Interesting.
So, yeah, for further reading, check out the Dollop did a podcast about the Coors family and how terrible they are. This reactor was tested twice at Jackass Flats in Nevada, running successfully for 5...
it was tested where?
Yeah, Jackass Flats. I forget the code name.
Oh, you just went right past that.
Yeah, no donkeys were harmed in the making of this one, but that was like one of the main test sites for I think Operation Plum Bob. Yeah,
Plum Bob.
Yeah. I think that was in the same area. I think it was like Area 27 was the code name for it.
I think I want to move to Jackass Flats. That sounds like a place I could really thrive.
I don't think you do. It's very radioactive, and just in the middle of the desert. Also,
so that doesn't make it any more toxic than what is going on in my life right now.
Yeah, so they tested it successfully for 5 minutes at full power. So they needed a whole lot of compressed air to test this because, it's on the ground. They can't get it supersonic. So they got 25 miles of oil well pipe to store compressed air in. And then in 1964, it was canceled because the top brass of the Pentagon thought it was too provocative towards the Soviet Union, which probably the right move. I also found an unconfirmed anecdote or rumor that the FAA would not allow them to test fly it, which also a good move, I would say.
Wow, so some good things happened in America where we were like, hey, let's pump the brakes on this, huh?
Yeah, well, but then in 2018, Vladimir Putin announced the development of the 9M730 Burevestnik, which is basically the same concept, nuclear-powered cruise missile.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so we got that to look forward to. After so ICBMs were developed before compact bombs were. So at one point, they needed more powerful engines to carry these heavy bombs. And that's what led to Project Rover and the Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application, or NERVA. This was a nuclear-powered rocket engine that was going to be used for the upper stages of ICBMs. It was basically the same ceramic core engine as previous, but it used liquid hydrogen as the fuel or the propellant, I guess, and highly enriched uranium. And then, so hydrogen is also a neutron moderator, and that basically means that the reactor would get hotter the more hydrogen you pumped through it. And so you could kind of control the power just by the flow of hydrogen. So liquid hydrogen starts at negative 200, or let's see, negative 480 Fahrenheit. But after it passed through the reactor, it was about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's a huge differential right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So again, at Jackass Flats, they did a couple tests, and it had pretty promising results. They were getting about twice the performance of a conventional rocket. And they also did destructive testing, which basically mean they blew it up to see what would happen. And the way they did this was they moved the controls at 22 times their normal speed, and this blew it up. This was January 12th, 1965, and the fallout from this explosion went over Los Angeles. So if you were living in LA at that time, yeah, sorry.
Yikes.
This project was a favorite of New Mexico Senator Clinton P. Anderson. Basically, he wanted to get more funding for Los Alamos, which was in New Mexico.
Oh, there's never any good Clintons.
Yeah. So this project was transferred to NASA after it became obsolete for ICBMs. And at one point, they were thinking about using it for a Mars mission, for Voyager probes, but then eventually it was canceled as part of budget cuts in the 70s. And then the Soviet Union had a similar project. It was called the RD-0410. And they also tested it, but maybe a little bit more wisely. They tested it underground to capture the fallout. And supposedly it was more powerful and reliable than the American Nerva engine. I didn't quite understand the science of this. It says that it had thermal insulation between uranium carbide / tungsten carbide fuel and the zirconium hydride moderator. I don't know what any of that means, but apparently it was better.
Well, and they at least thought ahead and thought, like, maybe we shouldn't irradiate our own population. Is that what I'm getting from this?
I don't think there's any science to support that.
So this was in development as late as the 1980s as a possible upper stage for, again, missions to the moon and Mars for the Russian or Soviet space program. And then they were thinking as late as 2018 for unmanned probes. But I couldn't find a whole lot of information about this one. But I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. So the last project I have, I couldn't find any confirmation if this was actually real, if it was actually built. A lot of it was just, rumors and speculation. And yeah. So the only sources I could find were a YouTube video, a Russian tabloid newspaper, and a Jalopnik article. So take this all with a grain of salt. So we're talking about the Soviet battle mole, or the nuclear submarine. So this was a weaponized tunnel boring machine. Basically, the idea was to make like the underground version of a submarine. But instead of like a conventional tunnel boring machine, which like slowly cuts away the rock and dirt, this had a red hot nuclear reactor in its nose, so it just melted everything in its path.
This seems like a bad idea.
There's actually a documentary about that. They took a little bit of liberties with it, but it's called Tremors.
Yeah. So the plan, according to the Russian tabloid paper at least, was to put one in a nuclear submarine and then drop it off on the ocean floor near the California coast. And then it would burrow down to the San Andreas Fault, leave a couple big nuclear bombs there, which could be triggered remotely and cause an earthquake. So supposedly a prototype was built and tested in the Ural Mountains, where apparently it was able to go as fast as 4 to 8 miles an hour through solid rock. but unfortunately it exploded. Huh?
Ooh, I'm sorry, I was about to say that ain't nothing, but then here's the catch.
Yeah, unfortunately it exploded underground, killing all aboard, and conveniently destroying any evidence that it ever actually existed.
Wait, so it bored at 4 to 8 miles an hour?
I mean, that's the claim. Like I said, there's no confirmation that this was actually ever built. There's really no evidence for it.
Yeah, if that's true, that would be wild fast, man.
Yeah. Eat your heart out, Elon Musk.
Yeah, he can't even build a tunnel cars can drive through at that speed.
Yeah, so that's all the nuclear-powered vehicles I had that I could find. You know, if you're listening to this and you found something else that I missed, you know, contact us. I think, what's our email? Is it carsandcomrades@gmail.com?
I'm pretty sure. Bear with me. Open the email. It's all right. It is Cars and Comrades spelled out. So you know, with the and spelled out, comrades@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I think that's all our social media is pretty similar. There might be a ampersand in some of them.
Yeah,
but,
some of them the ampersand made sense. Some of them it didn't. So take a guess. If you can't find it with one, it's going to be the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know. So if Bryant missed anything, let us know, and we'll be very interested in like being like, cool, good job finding that later, because just because you found something we happen to miss in a world this vast does not mean we're going to cover.
This is peak having your shit
together. The groundwork
okay, yeah,
now.
fair point. I was being optimistic and hoping that the listeners were sane and normal and
I feel like I've come across enough online leftists, of which I am one. The online left. I mean, we're too nitpicky. So let us know if we missed something. We'll take it under advisement. But that's about it.
Yeah,
that's all we got.
Yeah,
we'll tell you good job. Hey, that's cool that you found something that we didn't. But that's that. Maybe we'll do an episode revising it, but probably not.
Yeah, and if anyone that worked on any of these projects happens to listen, you know, what the fuck?
Yeah, you know, if any of you guys are listening, you know, call us up. We have some questions.
Yeah, namely, what the fuck?
Well, I was thinking, like, where do I get your drugs?
Yeah, I never came across any mention of drugs in any of these, but I have to imagine something was involved.
Dude, I feel extremely confident that if we really do the digging, like, every one of these projects is going to get connected to MK Ultra.
Yeah, maybe it was just lead poisoning, you know, or just like heavy metal poisoning in general. There's a lot of that going around in the 20th century.
Yeah, but there was also just a lot of MK Ultra.
Right.
I mean, I would guess at least tangentially related, because I'm sure everyone was on acid when they were coming up with this shit. Because
I'm pretty sure that was like part of like they were having departmental like, oh, we're going to take acid and see how everybody reacts to that, and then we're going to think. We're going to go get into a room and come up with the new ideas. We're going to see how this LSD works.
And the ideas they came up with were nuclear bombs under a spring-loaded missile. That's gonna
with people inside. With people inside.
So, you know, I think this might be an anti-drug message, honestly. Like, don't do drugs, kids. You'll come up with dumb shit.
I imagined when I was researching this that like all the people that were doing this were just like, I don't know, very straight button down like nerds, basically. Maybe some of them had like PTSD from World War II or just like living under the threat of nuclear destruction. And they're like, well, you know, we got to get those commies before they get us. You know, that was kind of the attitude, I feel. And you know, the ends justify the means, basically.
Yeah, that seems
I am willing to kill everyone I know to protect them from communism.
That is the United States from 1945 to to present.
Just until end of the empire.
Yeah.
TBD.
Cold War wasn't that fun.
Are you guys ready for Cold War II, China Boogaloo?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's nothing that I could find about China doing any of these things. Like maybe they're the sane ones. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but things are heating up now, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll get back into nuclear vehicles now that the U.S. and China are locked in a Cold War. I mean, it seems fitting.
In 30 years, we'll be doing a podcast about the time America tried to bore through the core of the Earth to infiltrate China.
Yes, literally digging a hole to China.
Yeah.
Hold on. But it's probably financed by China.
They're like boring through the Earth to invade China with a machine that we had China make for us.
Yeah,
Ordered
no,
it from
and
Alibaba.
then someone's going to complain. Someone will complain, they stole our technology. You're like, well, they made it. Like, it's kind of theirs, too. You see how that works, right?
They stole this design that we sent them.
Oh, man. That reminds me, we might have to do an episode on hoverboards, like the little Chinese electric things that everyone was getting for Christmas and they would catching fire. Like, that might be...
What? That was a thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Know anything about this.
It was a couple of years ago. It was like a Segway without the little T-bar handle, and they were, I don't know. You could buy them for like $100 on.
Oh, I know the hoverboards. Yeah. I didn't know that they just caught fire.
Yeah, no, like they would catch on fire underneath people's Christmas trees and stuff.
Oh, that's
this sounds like the worst version of Ghost Rider.
Yeah, but like I remember reading something about this. I'll have to look into this some more, but like they were sort of like designed by a committee of like different open source hackers in China, and they all kind of like made this like open source design that a bunch of factories built, and some of them would catch fire. Yeah, I don't know. That's about all I know about it.
I get it. Sometimes you just got to catch fire.
Yeah. Well,
all right. I got to roll out of here, guys.
Well, good talking to you, Brandon.
Y'all too. Everyone have a good week. Talk to you later.
Same here, Brandon.
Well, anything else before I hit stop recording?
I'm going to take that as a no.
Okay. All right. Well, goodbye to anyone that's still listening to this.
Yeah, bye, listeners. Should we do like outros? Is that a thing that we should do, or it? Like we just like trail off into our own conversation. Oh, are you still listening?
What are you still doing here, weirdo? Get out.
Yeah, time to
this
go.
This is between us now.
Yeah, we could break the fourth wall. That could be our thing. I feel like this is how our conversations devolve anyway, so it makes sense.
We don't think you fight fire with fire fists, we think you fight fire with water fists. We gonna fight racism, not with racism, but we gonna fight with solidarity. We said we're not gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we going to fight with socialism.
Amazingly, or not so amazingly, Cuba's crime rate is one of the lowest in the entire hemispheres. Oddly enough, it seems that when people have their basic human needs met, they're less likely to commit crimes.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interest and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us. Through something called the invisible hand.
What are you smiling about?
Dude, I almost had you.